of your guiding presence. Open our minds to ideas and opportunities before us. Fill our hearts with compassion and generosity for each other. May your wisdom and grace guide us in our work today, that we may do it not for ourselves alone, but for the common good of all. Almighty Father, may everything we do begin with your inspiration and continue with your saving help. Let our work always find its origin in you, and through you, we reach completion. We ask you this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you, and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. Thank the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good afternoon, everyone. Maayong hapon kanatong tanan. So we are here for the PM session of the PCSC 2021. So I am Greg Victor Gabisan. I'll be the one managing for this afternoon's session. Okay. So today, in the first hour, we would be hearing talks from invited. Actually, they are not actually guests because they have been in the CSP board for quite some time already. I think they have already owned a little more than how many columns? Columns as in the physical, literal columns in CSP. So they would be introduced in a couple of minutes, and they would, if this would be okay, I would be introducing them all together, because they have they have similar talks, and actually they are quite connected with each other. In fact, one is 101 and the other is 102. And okay, so I think we have the speakers already ready, and also for our paper presenters, which would start at 2:30 this afternoon. I would like you already to get in. Most of the speakers are already ready for the paper presenters, but I hope okay. I saw one already, the remaining one, so he's already ready. Also, I will be tagging him while when we would actually be commencing with our first invited talk this afternoon. Okay, so I think without much further ado, I would like to introduce quickly our first invited speaker this afternoon, who will be talking about International Quality Assurance 101. I don't know why it's 101. Why not 100? Why not 102? Probably we can ask him that question after his talk. So, ang tao nagikan sa pinakalayong lugar sa Pilipinas, sa pinakailawom na sektor, no? Ang ulirang sulugoon sa Davao, Dr. Randy Gamboa. Dr. Randy, take it away. Randy, you're on.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Greg, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Loud and clear.
yeah,
Okay.
sorry. Uh, as mentioned, maayong hapon sa tanan. And Greg, I still owe you one burger. You can actually check your inbox this afternoon. No, you could actually get your burger. So what I'll be
Appreciate that.
sharing, yeah, what I will be sharing today is about quality assurance in the context of international accreditation. So as mentioned by Greg, the title of my talk is about IQA 101. You could actually ask Greg, why 101? Why not 100 later? And then I think Sir Jamie will give more input of the details, especially about accreditation for the computing programs. So let me start with some disclaimer and disclosure. So a disclaimer, I do not represent any accrediting agencies. And in fact, I'm not an expert in QA activities. more so international. However, I've been involved in both private and public accreditation activities, both national and international also. And I have attended several engagement also about quality assurance activities, like attending the Seoul Accord meetings, the AUNQA program assessment, as well as ABET conferences. So I hope that will give me a little authority on my sharing today. So what I have actually are cocktails of presentation slides I got from these activities. So I'd like to give credits to the owners. So the next slides actually are some snapshots of my international QA engagement and some of my takeaways, no? My attendance to the Seoul Accord meeting, the ABET program assessment, and the AUNQA workshop for accomplishing program assessment. And then the images below are my takeaways after attending these activities. I could still vividly remember when I attended the AUNQA training. I've been asked, why AUN? And this puzzled me so much, no? And I was again about our graduates' whereabouts. Where does your tracer study tells you? And then questions about our university's beliefs also about continuous quality improvement. And just to be honest, in our university, we all have this. However, it's not well articulated. And that's a big challenge for us. As you can see, uh, the image on the bottom right, two of our programs, the BSCS and BSIT, is targeted to be internationally accredited by year 2022. And that's actually our 25th silver anniversary. So at the end of this presentation, we should be able to define what quality assurance is and then have a basic understanding of quality assurance in higher education and a basic understanding also on program assessment and institutional assessment, as well as a basic understanding on the requirement of international accreditation, a basic understanding on the accreditation process and what is needed to prepare a review, and then introduce options, no, for international accreditation of computing programs, as well as explain the requirements of SAR, or the self-assessment report, or a self-survey report.
Excuse me, Dr. Randy, your slides are not moving. We don't see the correct slide.
Okay,
Yes,
let me share again.
probably it's in your other screen, Dr. Randy.
How
Okay,
about that?
there. That's the one.
Okay,
So that's
so yeah, okay.
okay.
Okay. So these are the snapshots of my training, and then so the next slides actually tells us what quality is all about. No, if you can look at the presentation slides now, different stakeholders view quality as excellence. These are actually consistency for fitness and conformance to specification and meeting the objective as defined by its needs as well as its requirements. Therefore, when we talk quality enhancement, it is actually desirable in taking planned steps to bring about continuous improvement in the effectiveness and efficiency of learning experiences. I got these presentation slides from my training in AUNQA. So credits to AUNQA. The next question now is, how about quality assurance? So when you talk quality assurance here, it could actually be best described as a rigorous, systematic, objective, impartial. It's an expert examination to pursue higher levels of achievement and quality in the university. So therefore, quality assurance is actually a collaborative exercise. And one of its benefits is a consensus on its goals, its objectives, as well as the intended outcomes. And there is a standard benchmark set of a criteria for planning and evaluating the work of the university. Now, let me talk about some principles for quality assurance. So when we talk of quality assurance, that is the development and process driven, it's evidence based, it's customized, and it's actually flexible individually to programs. It's an important component of internal development, and it's actually facilitated by external agents. And it's actually a good learning experience for all involved with a welcome and dynamic approach rather than a mechanistic and a prescriptive approach. Now, let me now mention some benefits from quality assurance. So, it improves the work efficiency, the staff and the students' learning, as well as the achievement of the work's expected outcomes. It also ensures that quality systems exist in the university and that they are actually operational and that they have an influence on the quality of the work done. It also improves the institution's credibility. It develops and implements evidence-based decision making and a leadership practices. It also satisfies external demands for quality demonstration, quality assurance, and quality improvement. And it actually builds contacts, with external examiners, no? As well as the tools and contacts that they actually could share. It could provide a connection to other universities and institutions of higher education. So what is then quality assurance in higher education? So in these slides, quality in higher education is a multi-dimensional concept which should embrace all its functions and activities. These activities are teaching and academic programs, research and scholarship, staffing, student buildings, facilities, equipment, services to the community, and the academic environment. And internal self-evaluation and external review conducted openly by independent specialists, and if possible, with external or international expertise, which are actually vital for enhancing quality. So therefore, quality assurance in higher education can be defined as a systematic management in every aspect of work and assessment procedures, that is to monitor the performance of higher education institution. So therefore, QA addresses essential questions such as what process does the university have to plan, to monitor, to review, develop, and what it says it does, and value its work? And how does the university know and inform itself, as well as the stakeholders, if these procedures and processes are working? So questions like, are the procedures and processes in place? Is it operating and is it effective in meeting the university's standard or stated BMGO, its purposes, its policies, its self-evaluation contents, and its criteria, as well as its effectiveness of work? Questions like, how does the university inform itself and the stakeholders about the procedures and processes for planning, monitoring, reviewing, developing, and what does it says and values about its work? Questions like, how does the university inform itself about how these procedures and processes for its work are effective in terms of its outcomes and quality? So meaning here we do an impact analysis. And how high is the quality of the work and its elements? What possible benchmark and benchmarking does the university program operates? What possible recommendations can be needed for interventions as well as development. So the intention here is really actually to show that the university or the program has proper procedures and processes for quality assurance, that these are operating, making a positive differences, as well as impacting the university's work and its department. Now, what is QA for CHED? For CHED, quality assurance is actually a requirement for internationalization. And second, internationalization is a mechanism for quality assurance. And because of the urgent need to improve the quality assurance processes in the Philippine higher education, this is somehow to address the challenges of the 2011 Tokyo Convention, the ASEAN 2015, as well as other international quality assurance requirements. The Commission on Higher Education establishes a new and entirely separate office. That's the Office of the Institutional Quality Assurance and Governance. So CHED here actually defines quality threefold. First, quality is a fitness for purpose. It simply means that it pertains to the alignment and consistency of the learning environment with the higher educational institution, vision, mission, and goals. It requires the translation of our BMG into its learning outcomes, its programs, as well as the system. Second, quality as evidenced by the excellence or distinction. So HEI here must demonstrate exceptional or excellent learning and service outcomes. So they should go beyond the minimum requirements or standards. So they must also conform to standards based on a systems of comparison using criteria and ratings. And third, quality is transformative, which means it's a culture of quality that is rooted in the HEIs. So quality assurance for CHED makes sure that there are mechanisms, there are procedures and processes that is actually in place, no, to ensure that the desired quality, however defined and measured, is delivered. Its overall approach to QA is developmental. That's to help the HEIs develop the culture of quality. The next slide, I think some of us are actually familiar of CMO number 1 series of 2015. In fact, in Article 1 of that particular CMO, it states that it is the declared policy of the state to encourage and assist through CHED, which desire to attain standards of quality over and above the minimum required by the state. So CHED is just a minimum. So they are asking us also to go over and above. And then there's a particular in Article 2 also in that particular CMO that accreditation is a process for assessing and upgrading the quality of higher education. Okay? So what is accreditation then and how does it work? So when you talk about accreditation, it's a quality assurance processes that colleges, universities, and educational institutions or programs undergo to confirm that they meet a strict and a recognized set of service and operational standards. We have to understand here that accreditation is voluntary. And it is emphasized here also that educational institutions do not need accreditation to open their doors as well as offer any educational programs. This process is actually assessed by private, non-governmental accrediting agencies, as well as it is created specifically to review education, institution, and programs. So the importance of accreditation that is that it creates a quality standards for all educational institution or programs. It actually provides access to government funding It maintains private sector confidence and makes transferring credits easier. And furthermore, accreditation aims to ensure accountability of all educational institutions as well as degree programs. This is to boost public trust and confidence. And when an institution or degree program is accredited correctly, you can gauge its overall quality without conducting a detailed analysis on your part. There are actually two types of accreditation, an institutional accreditation and a program accreditation. So the evaluation focuses on the reform towards outcomes-based education and educational improvement by means of the plan, do, check, act cycle. That's the second advantage of education, which actually can improve through accreditation. Now, let me tell you about the accreditation process. No, the accreditation process for a college or a university entails many steps, and understanding how these colleges receive accreditation would actually help us understand why checking accreditation is a critical factor to consider when selecting a school. Number one is review by peers, meaning that both the administrative and faculty perform an intensive review of the prepared documents. These are actually written study and the general workings of the college or the university pursuing accreditation status after a structured paperwork had been submitted to the accrediting agency. And then followed by the examination and visits. So many accreditation organization would just send a team of experts to visit the college or the university requesting accreditation status after a peer review is completed. So this group is often made up of colleagues and members of the general public who donate their time to ensure that high educational expectations are met. And then a decision is made. So after the two steps are completed, the accreditation agency now asks their commissions to review the data and either confirm or reject the college or the university's accreditation status. And then lastly, it's a continual college. So meaning that a college or other institution that accepts accreditation status from a recognized accreditation agrees to follow the accreditation's organizational quality standards. And that is that the approved college also agrees to undergo an accreditation renewal process on a regular basis. So what is a program review then? It's actually a thorough, a systematic, an objective, an unbiased expert-based analysis assessment, as well as self-evaluation of how well a program is actually working. So the need to do self-evaluation is to somehow include opportunities for faculty and staff to participate in self-reflection, and then to ensure that the program is actually achieving its goals and that it has policies in place to keep track. And then what are the purposes of a program review and self-evaluation? Number one, it is constantly being improved and developed and ensure that the program is of the highest possible quality, as well as demonstrate that the program has adequate quality assurance protocols and processes in place, and demonstrate where and how these procedures could actually be found. And then also to provide feedback on the program's strengths and limitation, as well as areas that needs to be addressed along with actionable suggestions. So many more, no? Like for example, to assess how the program is enforcing its policies on all matters related to the environment. So the next is The program review here actually includes creating and submitting a self-assessment paper. Like for example, if you're familiar with AUN, they require us to submit SAR or a self-assessment report. For ABET, that's SSR. In our universities, all of these documents, we actually have dumped it in our UDAS or the University Document Archiving System. So the program review panel, normally these are actually internal members, normally also appointed by the university president, examines the self-evaluation proper. The next is, how about what are the advantages of international program accreditation, especially talking about MRA, no? So accreditation by a recognized international accreditation body actually certifies that the graduates of the program are actually eligible in the field of study. It actually increases the program's appeal to foreign students and encourages international job mobility for program graduates. So there are actually international MRAs or mutual recognition accords, no, for computing. So you have the Seoul Accord, the Washington Accord, Sydney for engineering technologies, and Dublin Accord for engineering technician. So an accord simply consists of accreditation organization that mutually recognize the accreditation of all accord members as being substantial or substantially equivalent for preparing graduates to begin a professional practice. And the computing and engineering accords have actually or base substantial equivalency on a graduate attributes. And these graduate attributes are essentially outcomes that are expected of graduates of any program accredited by the accord members. And each signatory member of an accord is expected to ensure that graduates of its accredited programs attain the specified graduate attributes for the accord. And all of the signatories of the computing and engineering accords have established or establishing outcomes-based criteria for accreditation. So the next question is, are there any external accreditation agency in the Philippines that can directly accredit computing programs? So the answer actually is yes. And what agency? I would say ABET. So the next is there any mutual recognition agreement among accreditation organization or jurisdiction in computing? Well, the answer is yes. What is it? The Seoul Accord. So the Seoul Accord is actually a multilateral mutual recognition agreement among agencies responsible for accreditation of tertiary level computing and IT related qualification. And here are some facts about the Seoul Accord. It's founded in 2008. Five of the eight signatories are actually signatories also of the Washington Accord. The founder of the Washington Accord is a signatory of the Seoul Accord. The chairman of the Seoul Accord actually represents ABET also. And then these are the signatories. As you can see in this slide here, there's pickup. No, there are eight original signatories: ABET, Accreditation Board for Engineering Education in Korea. You have the ABET, you have the Australian Computer Society, the British Computer Society, the Canadian Information Processing System, and many more, no? And in fact, there are more who are actually in a probationary status like PICAB. So a significant event actually happened last 2013, no? Four IT professional organizations banded together and formed the Philippine Information and Computing Accreditation Board. Before it was known as Philippine. Now it's PCS, no? PCS Information and Computing Accreditation Board. Its goal is to obtain external recognition of Philippine accredited programs in computer science, information systems, and information technology. It provides greater mobility of a Philippine computing professional, as well as to develop an outcomes-based system for the accreditation of a baccalaureate degree in computer science, and then to develop, create, and document the processes for the accreditation of a baccalaureate degree programs in computing and information technology. Now, let me give you a little sharing about my experience, no, about my little learnings about my trainings on the AUNQA program assessment. In that particular training, we learn about the AUNQA framework. We learn how to interpret the AUNQA criteria for program level, as well as apply the PDCA approach to SAR, as well as explain the requirements of SAR and some techniques for writing SAR. These are some of my takeaways, no? Some insights about assessment that I learned actually from the training. Now, I learned that in general that there are two types of assessment in higher education and can be classified into two, the rules-based and the principles-based. So when we talk of rules-based, it actually focuses on compliance to standards and indicators, while a principles-based system focuses on a set of underlying principles of a continuous quality improvement that's coming from Lindsay Haywood, no? However, empirical and scholarly evidence suggests that the principles-based system has a more gradual startup, but a more enduring and sustainable gains in quality improvement over a longer period than the rules-based system. So the next slide actually shows you a comparison between the characteristic of a principle and a rules-based system. And this is actually some of my takeaways also, no? That when you talk of, let's say, uh, feedback, when you talk of principles, it's more of a formative than a summative. In terms of methodology, it's more of an assessment or evaluation. And these are some of my takeaways also. I just learned this one, no? In my AUNQA training, these four important keywords, because we've been visited by ISO, we've been visited by many accreditation agency, and then I found out na iba-iba pala ang meaning ng accreditation, assessment, audit, and evaluation. And the way I see it, AUN is an assessment that is simply for the purpose of improving effectiveness of QA system. So when you talk of AUN, it's non-prescriptive. It recommends areas for improvement rather than mandating solutions, as well as contextualized rather than standardized QA practices. So the first item here is actually accreditation, assessment, audit, and evaluation. So pag sinabing ISO, tawag sa kanila auditor. Pag sinabing AACO, tawag sa kanila is accreditor. So magkaiba yan, no? So let me now talk about AUNQA SAR. No? This is very important to us because this is actually what we are doing now in the university. It's actually
Randy, sorry, 5 minutes more for the talk.
Okay. So it's actually a typical self-assessment project that would take about 9 months to a year to prepare. So these are normally the components of a SAR. And then let me talk about QN. Because of the global pandemic also, the remote QA assessment serves as a contingency plan. So what I know is sometime July 2020, a working draft was actually presented to the staff as well as to the administrator of those schools who would wanted to have accreditation. And I know of one particular school in Davao, I think the only non-NCR to be AUN QA accredited by remote visit. And these are the AUN program level. What I attended is 3.0. Now there is a new version that was actually released last year. That's version 4.0. So what's the difference? In 4.3, in 3.0, there are actually 11 criterion. In 4.0, there are now 8 criterion. Okay, so you can actually get more information of AUN. You could actually download their manual. Now, a little of ABET. ABET has basically the same. There are actually 8 elements. And then they require also a self-study report. And then these are actually the timeline. Normally, it's about more than a year to prepare. And I think that's about it. Daghang salamat, by Greg.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Randy. So we can actually have one question. We can accommodate one question if there's one. Actually, somebody messaged me for one question, but I would be giving that opportunity for the others to ask. Any question? Okay, so thank you, Dr. Randy, for that fundamental and almost complete knowledge about quality assurance through accreditation. Why almost complete? Because we have to cut him down. Actually, last night, he begged to have more than an hour, but I told him we can only give you 30 minutes of the time. So probably there could be a part two for his talk probably next year, no? And for the PCSC 2022. Okay. And for the information of everyone, just a little bit of trivia. Dr. Randy Gamboa is actually the president, has been president for the Philippine Society of IT Education for 5 years, for 5 consecutive years, a record that's still not overtaken by anyone. And currently, he's the vice president of our organization, Computing Society of the Philippines. And just a bit of quick note and in about what Dr. Randy said, just to qualify what he talked about. Coming from Leo Tolstoy, a Nobel Prize winner, he's a Russian guy, and he said, like, what is important in knowledge is not quantity but quality. It is important to know what is significant, what is less so, and what is trivial. Okay, so a while ago I said trivial information, Randy. So Randy is trivial. So anyway, just a quick question, Randy. For us in the academe, we understand the importance of quality assurance accreditation. But to the industry, what does it mean to them? So
So,
that's some kind
sorry.
of a Miss Universe question.
Yeah, sorry, Greg. I could not actually answer in behalf of the industry. Mine is just for a university like our university. It's actually a government university. We are actually mandated by the government, by the state, to subject ourselves, no, to accreditation. That is more than what is being required by CHED. As to the industry, I think many of the industry are actually ISO.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Randy. So with that, allow me to share this electronic certificate of appreciation to Dr. Randy Gamboa, which immediately after accepting this one, we would be emailing it to him. So for a moment, where's that? Okay, here. Dr. Randy Gamboa, congratulations. Here's our certificate, your certificate of appreciation. Dr. Randy Gamboa for sharing his valuable time and expertise as resource speaker of this year's Philippine Computing Science Congress held the 6th of May 2021. Congratulations, Dr. Randy, and we're expecting a lot of work from you again for the longest time. Okay, so with that, we can now proceed with our next speaker. Okay, so just to quickly introduce our next speaker, um, actually, Dr. Jimmy, as we call him, is currently a professor of computer science, the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and heads its service science and software engineering laboratory. Dr. Jimmy is the founder of Tech Factors Incorporated and series editor of Tech Factors courseware. Currently, he's the chairman of the CHED Technical Panel on Information Technology Education. Uh, he has he, ah of me, yeah, well, probably. Oh, he's a member of the technical panel of IT education, and at the same time, he's actually the chair for the Committee on Information Systems. Am I correct, Dr. Jimmy? Yeah, so that's the correct one. And then, yeah, he was assistant vice president for development of the UP Philippines, University of the Philippines for 14 years, and he has served as president in different computer organizations like this organization, Computing Society of the Philippines, president of the PSite, and also he has been vice president for GDAP, as well as president of the UP System Information Technology Foundation. And he has been in the Philippine computing scene for more than 4 decades already, or more so. So you can already guess how old he is. Sorry, Dr. Jimmy. So anyway, Dr. Jimmy's area of research interests are in information systems, combinatorial optimization, and algorithms. And application areas of past researches are in education, medical informatics, transportation, and climate modeling. So, ladies and gentlemen, without much further ado, Dr. Jimmy, you have the Zoom conference now.
Yes, thank you. Teka ha, mali yata na share ko. Okay, I should share.
The other screen.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you, Greg, for that. And just to correct, I haven't been in the scene for four decades. That will make me naman ako senior citizen. Although I already got my vaccine as a person with comorbidity. And okay.
Including high school, Doc Jimmy, sorry.
Including high school, pwede. Or elementary, mas bumata pa. Okay, I'll talk about quality assurance through accreditation for computing programs. And just like Randy, I have this disclaimer. I'm not an expert on accreditation. I consider myself a student of accreditation processes. I'm still learning. I will continue to learn. I'm not related or involved in ABET accreditation. I'll be talking about mostly ABET accreditation here. ABET stands for Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology. I was a member of PCAB, Philippine Information Computing Accreditation Board. Now I'm an alternate member representing. That's PCS. Representing CSP, and I have attended the Seoul Accord meeting in 2019, also representing CSP. So mostly I will talk about ABET and the Computing Accreditation Commission's criteria for accrediting computing programs. So these were the criteria already also mentioned by Dr. Randy, although I will go over one by one with this criteria. So in detail. So there are general criteria like this, 1 to 8, students, program education objectives, student outcomes, continuous improvement, curricula, faculty, facilities, institutional support. And then there are program-specific criteria. Program-specific criteria for computer science, information systems, information technology. They have also new criteria for cybersecurity degrees and degrees in data science. So you note that these two degrees here are also part of the computing, the CAC or Computing Accreditation Commission. Okay. So first, some definitions. Program educational objectives are broad statements that describe what graduates are expected to attain within a few years after graduation. They are based on the need of the program's constituencies. So then student outcomes, these describe what students are expected to know and be able to do by the time of graduation. So they relate to knowledge, skills, behaviors that students acquire as they progress through the program. Assessment, this is one or more process that identify, collect, and prepare data for evaluation to determine if the student outcomes have been met. So they may include relevant direct, indirect, quantitative, and qualitative measures. as appropriate to the outcome being measured. So sampling techniques, sampling methods may be used as part of an assessment process. So that means you don't really have to submit everything from all the students in the program, but just sampling using some scientific sampling techniques. Evaluation is one or more process for interpreting the data and evidence accumulated through the assessment processes. So you determine through the evaluation the extent to which the student outcomes have been met or attained. So results of such evaluation may be decisions and actions regarding program improvement. How will you improve the program? Okay, let's go to criterion 1 on students. So now student performance need to be evaluated to monitor the progress of the student, the success in attaining student outcomes. Always there's the focus on student outcomes. Are the program educational objectives being met? And how do you enable graduates to attain the program educational objectives? And then advising on curriculum, enforce policies for accepting both new and transfer students, awarding. So different policies of the schools are also looked at, like transferring, admission, award of credits taken from other institutions, or maybe for work in your courses. And then how do you ensure that those given degrees have satisfied all the requirements? Okay, criterion 2 is on program educational objectives. So the program should have educational objectives that are consistent with the mission of the institution, the needs of the constituencies, and the criteria for evaluation, as well as it should meet the. So those program educational objectives have to be published and visible to all the different stakeholders. You must have a documented, systematically utilized, and effective processes involving constituencies on how to review the program educational objective on a regular basis, and to ensure that those program educational objectives satisfy or continue to satisfy the needs of the constituents, the industry, for example, the employers, the institutional mission, etc. Criterion 3 is on student outcomes. So under this, you need to document that student outcomes. So there are actually six student outcomes. 5 of them are in the general criteria, and 1 is specific to the program. So these are the graduate outcomes, the 5 that are general for all computing programs. So regardless of whether that's computer science, information systems, information technology, or other programs in computing, they have to satisfy all these 5 criteria, 5 program outcomes. No? Analyze a complex computing problem and apply principles of computing and other relevant disciplines to identify solutions. Design, implement, and evaluate computing-based solutions to meet a given set of computing requirements in the context of the program's discipline. Then, communicate effectively in a variety of professional contexts, recognize professional responsibilities, and make informed judgments in computing practices based on legal and ethical principles, function effectively as a member or leader of a team, engaged in activities appropriate to the program's discipline. This may be familiar to some of you who looked at, who have been involved in curriculum design and development, and who have looked at the computing curricula from the ACM IEEE, or even from the CHED CMO, CHED Memorandum Order, CMO 25. So we also have similar graduate outcomes. Okay. So the idea here is you have to document how these student outcomes are met by your students, by your graduates. So the program must regularly, so next criterion 4 is continuous improvement. I think this is also a difficult part of the uh, accreditation process. The program must regularly use appropriate documented process for assessing and evaluating the extent to which student outcomes are being attained. And the result of these evaluations must be systematically utilized as input for the program's continuous improvement action. So first question there is, are the outcomes, graduate outcomes being attained by the students? How are you measuring it? And after you measure it, what do you do with what you measured? What do you know with what you learned? So some students may not have attained it. What do you do with that? Other available information may also be used to assist in the continuous improvement of the program. So how do you do continuous improvement in the program? So those who have been involved in ISO certification are also aware of this process of continuous improvement as necessary for proving that you are on the right track in improvement. Okay, criterion 5 is on curriculum. The program's requirements must be consistent with its program educational objectives and designed in such a way that each of the student outcomes can be attained. So you combine technical, professional, general education components to prepare students for a career, further study, and lifelong professional development in the computing disciplines specific to the program. So ABET doesn't require specific courses, but they specify topics. The program must include mathematics appropriate to the discipline and at least 30 semester credit hours or equivalent of up-to-date coverage of fundamental and advanced computing topics that provide both breadth and depth. So computing topics must include this: techniques, skills, tools, principles and practices, local and global impacts of computing solutions on individuals, organizations, and societies. So those must be covered in the curricula. So the next area here is faculty. Criterion 6 is on faculty. Every faculty member teaching in the program must have expertise and educational background consistent with contributions to the program expected from the faculty member. So every faculty member will be assessed, but are they qualified? Are they qualified based on different criteria? They look at education, professional credentials, certifications, professional experience, ongoing professional development, contributions to the discipline that may include research, teaching effectiveness, communication skills, or professional work. So depending on what they are teaching, what they are contributing to the program, they will be assessed. So collectively, the faculty must have breadth and depth to cover the curricular areas of the program. So all the different courses in the program or knowledge areas have to be covered. So you must have experts in the different areas that you teach in the program. The faculty serving in the program must be of sufficient number to maintain continuity, stability, oversight, student interactions, and advising. You can see that it's not as prescriptive as the CHED memorandum orders, CHED guidelines, but it's more flexible in the sense, but at the same time, it may be more, in fact, more exacting actually, because then now you have to make sure that every faculty member who teaches what the courses they teach are really able to contribute to that area. The faculty must have sufficient responsibility and authority to improve the program through definition and revision of program educational objectives and student outcomes. So, okay. Next, facilities. Classrooms, offices, laboratories, and associated equipment must be adequate to support attainment of student outcomes. And you should be able to provide an atmosphere conducive to learning. So there should be modern tools, equipment, computing resources, laboratories appropriate to the program. Systematically maintained, upgraded to enable students to attain the student outcomes. The library services and computing and information infrastructure must be adequate to support scholarly and professional activities of the students and faculty. So naturally, that also means there should be adequate resources in the library and computing facilities as well, so that researchers, students doing research would be able to access the resources they need. Okay. Institutional support. So institutional support and leadership must be adequate to ensure the quality and continuity of the program. So this may include institutional services, financial support, and staff, both administrative and technical, provided to the program, which must be adequate to meet program needs. So resources available to the program must be sufficient to attract, retain, and provide for continued professional development of a qualified faculty. So there should be sufficient resources so that the faculty will be able to function well. The resources available to the program must be sufficient to acquire, maintain, and operate infrastructure, facilities, and equipment appropriate for the program, and to provide an environment in which the student outcomes can be attained. Okay. Let's look at program criteria for the different specific programs. So the first program we'll look at is computer science. So in student outcomes, I mentioned earlier, there are 6 student outcomes, 5 are general, and the 6th one is specific to the program. So in this case, for computer science, the 6th student outcome is apply computer science theory and software development fundamentals to produce computing-based solutions. For the curriculum, these are the additional requirements for computer science. So there must be topics in computer science and mathematics and natural sciences. So let's look again at computer science. For computer science, at least 40 semester credit hours that must include substantial coverage of algorithms and complexity, computer science theory, concepts of programming languages, and software development. Then there must be substantial coverage of at least one general purpose programming language. And then there's exposure to computer architecture and organization, information management, networking, communication, operating systems, and parallel and distributed computing. The study of computing-based systems of varying levels of abstraction should be covered. A major project that requires integration application of knowledge and skills acquired in earlier coursework is also required. So that's the capstone project. Okay, that's capstone project is required. So I think for most of these, most computer science programs in the Philippines would qualify, except ito yung wala sa mga SACHED requirement to, no? Parallel and distributed computing. That's the only one. So if you comply with the CHED requirements, you also comply with this part of the curriculum, except for this one. Yun lang, yung coverage niyan. They will also look at the coverage. How far do you go in each one of them, no? The level should be should not be too elementary, should cover the breadth and depth in computer science at the undergraduate level. Okay. Next, okay, let's look at curricular requirements specific to mathematics, at least 15 semester credit hours that must include discrete mathematics and must have mathematical rigor at least equivalent to introductory calculus. The additional mathematics might include coursework in areas such as calculus, linear algebra, numerical methods, probability statistics, or number theory. Yan. So, 15 semester credit hours. More or less also equivalent to 15 units sa Philippines. So, our CHED CMO doesn't really include 15 units of mathematics for computer science. But for us in UP, we have more than enough here kasi we have, I think we have 27 units of mathematics. Sobrang dami. But yes, so these are important areas: calculus, linear algebra, numerical methods, probability statistics, or number theory. Or naman yan. No? At least 6, ito naman sa natural science requirement, at least 6 semester credit hours or equivalent to natural science coursework intended for science and engineering majors. What does it mean by intended for science and engineering majors? It means na may rigorous mathematics yan. So, kung physics yan, that should be include calculus-based na physics. The coursework must develop an understanding of the scientific method and must include laboratory work. Okay. So, hindi counted dito yung introductory natural science, not Sci 1, not Sci 2, mga ganon. Hindi counted dyan yan. It has to be intended for science and engineering majors. So like for physics, it has to be calculus-based physics. Pwede rin chemistry, but it has to be not introductory chemistry, but organic or inorganic chemistry. Mga ganon. Okay. Some full-time faculty members, criteria 6 on faculty must have a PhD in computer science. So, some full-time faculty. Hindi naman required na lahat may full PhD in computer science, but some full-time faculty must have a PhD in specific sa computer science. So, sa lahat ng ano dito, ng program criteria for faculty, ito lang yung nagre-require ng specific degree. As you can see, we will see later sa information systems. For information systems, yung criteria sa faculty, mas maluwag ng konti. Tingnan natin. For faculty for information systems, some full-time faculty members, including those responsible for the information systems curriculum development, must hold a terminal degree with a program of study in information systems. Terminal degree in information systems. So it doesn't have to be a doctorate in information systems. It can be a master's in information systems. Kung wala pa namang doctorate in information system. Na?
So, Jimmy, 5 minutes more.
Sorry. Okay. So, other criteria for information systems. Ito yung sa outcomes, support the delivery, use, and management of information systems within an information systems environment. And then there are curricular requirements, like information systems, specific information system environment, and quantitative analysis. Ito, similar to CHED to eh. So, not a big problem. Whereas for information technology, did I miss the student outcomes? Use appropriate approaches to select, develop, apply, integrate, and administer secure computing technologies to accomplish user goals. Ito yung curriculum. Also not too different from ours, from the Philippine CHED guidelines. For faculty, the curriculum requirements specify topics but do not prescribe courses. Ito pa rin yung curriculum pa rin ito. there should be IT. Okay. And then, for faculty, wala namang specific requirements sa faculty rin. Okay. So, there's this accreditation policy and procedure manual. You can download this for free online. Pati yung kaninang pinakita ko yung Computing Accreditation Commission. Ito, criteria for accrediting computing programs. Go to the ABET website and you can download it. For the initial accreditation, you need to prepare a readiness review, which must be completed for our programs within an institution. And then the outcomes for so you submit the readiness review before you can even apply for accreditation. Then there's this ABET self-study questionnaire template for a self-study report, which you can also download from the ABET website. The self-study report is expected to be a quantitative and qualitative assessment of the strengths and limitations of the program being submitted for review. So you need as part of the self-study review, self-assessment. So you need to provide evidence for all of these: student admissions, evaluating student performance transfer, advising, graduate requirements, and so on. You need to provide evidence for program educational objectives, evidence for student outcomes that you have met. These the student outcomes, describe where they are. And for this continuous improvement, you have to document the process for regularly assessing and evaluating the extent to which student outcomes are being attained. So yeah. So example, a listing of description of assessment processes, frequency with which they are assessments are processes are carried out, expected level of attainment, and so on. Like for example, exams, theses, projects, they should be submitted as evidence. And then you may have an exit questionnaire or survey, or a regular survey you do with the students, whatever other assessment that you use. For the curriculum, detailed plan, flowchart, etc., course syllabi. For the faculty, qualifications, workload, the size, professional development will be looked at. For the facilities, they will look at offices, laboratories, computing resources, guidance, library, and overall comments on facilities. And for institutional support, they will look at budget, staffing, faculty hiring and retention, faculty development. So all of this will be included as appendices, syllabi, curriculum vitae of faculty, equipment, and so on. And these are also in the appendix, the institutional, about the institution. So that will end my presentation here. So
Thank you very much, Dr. Jimmy.
yes.
So do we have any question from the audience about computing accreditation for computing programs? So if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Jimmy, the ones that you presented were criterions coming from ABET, right?
Right, ABET,
Okay.
Accreditation for Engineering and Technology, specifically for the Computing Accreditation Commission of ABET.
Okay. So if that any question, if there's none, I would be the ones to ask a question for this quickly. If you try to check it out, and then after hearing from you, you repeatedly mentioned that there's that much consistency with our minimum requirement, which we're following with respect to the PSGs coming from our shared memorandum, and a consistency between our program set up in the Philippines through CMO 25 of 2015 and with that of ABET. So does it follow, Dr. Jimmy, that it would not be much of a climb or a challenge if we pursue accreditation for ABET accreditation for our computing programs?
Well, as long as you comply uh, with all the requirements, I think for the BSIT or BSIS, it's not as difficult to comply for Philippine high quality Philippine computing programs. As long as you have documented evidence of all of the requirements, and the most difficult part that there is the continuous improvement and the collection of all the assessment methods from the students. And but for computer science, there is the curricular requirements are a bit more stringent, so it has to be over and above the CHED minimum requirements.
Okay. Okay. So thank you very much, Dr. Jimmy. So I would like to share with you our certificate that we would be virtually sharing to you via email. So allow me to share my screen. So in behalf of the Computing Society of the Philippines, on this 21st Philippine Computing Society, 21st Philippine Computing Science Congress. So I think I'm sharing my screen correctly. This certificate of appreciation is extended to Dr. Jimmy Caro for his invaluable time and expertise as one of the resource speaker for this year's PCSC. Signed, Dr. Randy Gamoa, Congress Chair, and our President, Dr. Rachel Edita Rojas. So let's give a big round of applause for Dr. Jimmy.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Okay, okay. So moving forward, we would now proceed with our first presenter for the manuscript or paper submission. So for a moment, allow me to pull up the program that I have. Okay. So our first presenter this afternoon with this paper entitled "Using Convolutional Neural Networks for Hierarchical Grocery Store Product Classification." So the presenter is Mr. Aaron Matthew Antukia. So Aaron, you have now the floor. You may now start, and you're given 30 minutes. And within the 30 minutes, uh, you can actually have about 10 minutes the most for Q&A. Okay, so you now have the floor.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, good afternoon. I'm going to present my paper. My paper is entitled Using Convolutional Neural Networks for Hierarchical Grocery Store Product Classification. I'm Aaron Matthew C. Antioquia. I'm from the Software Technology Department of De La Salle University. So to give you an outline of my presentation, we'll first begin with the motivation of the study, followed by the different CNN classifiers that we are going to employ in this study. We're going to also discuss the experimental setup that we have done in this paper, followed by the different contributions that we have given for this research work. So first, for the motivation, as we know, back in 2012, we have actually seen the reintroduction of convolutional neural networks in solving computer vision problems. Back when AlexNet was proposed in NeurIPS, right? So as we progress along, and as fast as 2015, we were able to actually reduce the top 5 error on the ImageNet dataset as low as 3.57%. And because of this success in convolutional neural networks being applied to classification, we are now seeing that various computer vision techniques are being used in various fields and application. And I would like to say that I prefer to divide computer vision into two main categories, primarily the discriminative part and the generative part. Discriminative on the left is with regards to recognizing something, while generative on the other hand is you're generating images or videos. And we'll focus our study for today on the discriminative part of computer vision. And as we have known, this is being applied to multiple applications already. And for today, we'll zero in on a specific topic wherein we are applying these technologies in applications that will help visually impaired people, right? We are seeing here a screenshot from Microsoft Seeing AI, wherein, um, sorry, this application allows us to read short text, to read documents, products, recognize products, recognize scenes and persons. We are also able to recognize currency and other images in other apps. This is a demo that they gave in the website, wherein we are seeing here a visually impaired person looking at a menu in the restaurant. So this app is helping it to read the menu of this their restaurant. This is another demo that they gave. So this is with regards to looking at the or describing the person uh, in front of a visually impaired person. In this example, it is recognizing the male person on the right with this age approximately around 40 and the expression on his face. But for today, let's focus on one problem first, and that is product recognition. As we know that visually impaired person and most of us people uh, needs to um, perform some um, tasks that we repeat every day, and one of which is to recognize items, specifically in a grocery setting. And in these technologies, in our current technologies that we have today, even the one given to us by Microsoft Seeing AI, they use the barcode in order for us to recognize, or for visually impaired people to recognize the product that he is currently holding. Okay, as seen in this video, right? So it's reading the barcode. However, for visually challenged people, it is very challenging to look for the specific barcode of an item or a grocery item in this case. That's why we want to design CNNs to recognize grocery products without using the barcode. And there are actually seminal works on this one already, or connected works to this one already. But there are challenges in terms of the problem, in terms of this problem, because in a grocery setting, as we know, similar items are usually placed beside each other. And sometimes it gets mixed, right? So minsan nagkakaroon ng problem with the recognition. And another one is, as seen in this illustration on the left, some items, especially those who are packaged or refrigerated, are only differentiated by people by visually inspecting that. Okay, and these are some seminal works or works that we can refer to regarding this problem of classifying or recognizing grocery products. So the first one is, there's a study back in 2020. This is called Deep Roots, wherein they are using CNNs to recognize detection, or using it for a detection system to estimate the yield and automate the harvesting of fruits. However, contrary to our work, this focuses on the recognition of fruits and vegetables in a different setting. And they are only limited to fruits and vegetables. There's also this work on using CNNs wherein they want to classify or to recognize online products. So as we have seen in this illustration, the top two rows are responsible for images that are placed by product by the seller, right? So walang masyadong occlusion, walang masyadong um, lighting problems, and so on and so forth. While we know in Lazada and Shopee, users are actually allowed to upload images of what they have received, which is represented by the other two rows here, right? So as contrary to our to our study, we are actually focused more on everyday grocery items that we see in a grocery setting. And this one is more of an online setting. Online setting naman. And ito na siguro yung pinakamalapit wherein CNNs are used to recognize raw grocery products such as fruits and vegetables. Different lang yung use case, but again, compared to our study, this focuses on items that are fruits and vegetables na. So mga raw grocery items. Now, for our work, we design an exhaustive set of experiments in using various state-of-the-art CNN classification models trained on a grocery data set, a grocery store data set. And we have here, we will show later that our implementations of CNN models exhibit superior accuracy over current state-of-the-art classifiers. But before we discuss what we have done, we are going to first discuss the different CNN classifiers that we use in this study. The first one is, of course, AlexNet, and this was cited by the paper which did the baseline experiments for the grocery store product classification. And this is the first to reintroduce convolutional neural networks back to computer vision. Right? So it is composed of multiple convolutional layers and max pooling layers. And there are also fully connected layers here before you actually classify the image that you saw. So this is the part we're using convolutional layers in order for us to extract the features of the given image and afterwards classify it. So the gist or the main discovery in the AlexNet paper is that using rectified linear units, which we see here on the left as the solid line, converges 6 times faster than identical networks. And without this discovery of AlexNet, I think we are not, we cannot train our networks as fast as possible as we have now. Then after AlexNet, one of the landmark papers on CNN classification or CNN classifiers is PGG network from, this one is presented in ICLR. There are 2 different configurations of this one. And this, I think, is from the University of Oxford back in 2014. And their main idea is to make the network deeper. That is their hypothesis. To make the network deeper in order for us to get a better classification accuracy. So they have 2 models. 16 here represents the number of convolutional layers. And this one should be BGG90. So this is BGG16 and this is BGG90. However, looking at the next landmark paper after that, which was presented in CBPR 2015, this is ResNet. Sabi ni BGGNet, let's just add layers on top of each other. Okay, so they tested what is the limit, or is stacking multiple layers on top of each other really that helpful? And according to the experiments of ResNet, as we can see in this figure adapted from their paper, notice the yellow line here represents the error rate of a 20-layer network, while on the other hand, this red line represents the error rate for a 56-layer network or a larger network, a network with more layers. Now, the one on the left and the one on the right is the training and the test errors respectively. And as we can see that as the network depth increases, accuracy actually gets saturated. So the hypothesis of BGGNet in naively increasing the network layers are not that general in nature, right? So convolutional neural networks are now having a hard time modeling the data that is given to it as we increase the number of layers. That's why the hypothesis of ResNet is, what if we just learn the residuals? That's why it's called ResNet or residual networks. And there are 2 different types of residual blocks that they use in ResNet. One of which is this one. This is the basic residual block, which is composed of 2 convolutional networks. While on the other hand, this is the bottleneck version of the residual block composed of 3 layers, 2 of which are 1 by 1 convolution, and the one in the middle is 3 by 3. So the idea here is these layers actually just learn the residual from the input. So we are adding the input in such a way that the output of this one should just be the residual in learning. And these are the different configurations that we have used in the study. We use 4 different configurations of ResNet, that is ResNet 34, ResNet 50, 101, and 152, 3 of which use bottleneck layers, that is ResNet 50 up until 152, wherein this number represents the number of layers in the number of convolutional layers in the network. While on the other hand, ResNet 34 is the only one we use the basic residual network with 2 3x3 layers. We have here 4 different residual blocks, wherein each block contains multiple layers. So some of them, especially block 2, pare-parehas lang na may 3 layers or 3 residual layers inside block 2 for all configurations of ResNet. But as we want to increase the number of layers, and that is the idea behind ResNet, parang tinutulungan the connections that they have made here, okay, solves the problem of the degradation of the accuracy. And extending that idea from ResNet, the idea behind DenseNet is, what if we do not, we extend that idea such that the input from this layer, we append that instead of element-wise summation, we append that to succeeding layers, right? So you are not just sending it to your succeeding layer or your immediately succeeding layer, you pass it to all of the layers that are after you. That is the idea of DenseNet. And somehow their hypothesis says that it actually increases the information flow in the network. So this is the general idea or the general form of a DenseNet. And then again, this is composed of 4 dense blocks, wherein we have 3 configurations that we used in the study, that is DenseNet 121, DenseNet 169, and DenseNet 201. So the table here represents how many layers are there inside a specific dense block for a DenseNet configuration. Yeah, that's it for the different CNN architectures that we have used. We are now going to our experimental setup. We used a data set from 2019, which was presented in WACB. This is the grocery store data set, and it is composed of 81 fine grain classes, and 46 of which are coarse grain classes. So hierarchical siya in a way that we will discuss later. But this data set is composed of approximately 5,000 images, 50 of which are used for train and 50 are used for testing. To date, as we have seen in the literature, this is the most comprehensive data set for grocery store product classification. This is an example of what we see in what we say or what we mean about hierarchical. This means that the data set has two, or each image in the data set actually has 2 kinds of labels. One of which is the fine grained label, which is more specific, kaya mas marami yung classes, and 46 of which are coarse grain. So we know that all of these images are bell peppers. But if we are going to make it more specific, we need to say or classify that this is green bell pepper, this is orange, this is red, and this is yellow. Here are some of the implementation details that we employed in our study. We used a learning rate of 0.001. The momentum that we set is 0.9, and the weight decay is 0.0005. This is using a stochastic gradient descent as our optimizer. And the number of epochs that we have trained our networks is 60 epochs. And we have a learning rate schedule wherein we reduce the learning rate by a factor of 10 at epoch 40 and epoch 50. And for the input size of our image, we use 224 by 224, which is the standard input size for convolutional neural networks for classification. In training our network, we also employ data augmentation, wherein we use standard online data augmentation techniques. We change the contrast of the image, the brightness of the image, the hue, saturation. We sometimes flip it and crop it in such a way that we are increasing our data set to make the classifiers that we have more general. And this is our result. The result on top is the result from the baseline paper, or the paper that presented the dataset. All of their work uses SBM as their classifier. While on the other hand, we somehow replace that classifier on top of their convolutional neural networks with softmax, with the typical softmax that we use in convolutional neural networks. So this is our part of the experiment. And compared to what they have presented, okay, compared to what they have presented, we have actually more networks. We present more experiments with more networks and using a different classifier. So let's break this table down. The first one is, let's compare the accuracy between their implementation of VGGNet as compared to our implementation. If we're looking at this one, focusing on this one, and by the way, this column represents if that specific model has been fine-tuned. So itong mga walang check, that means that that is just off-the-shelf networks that are pre-trained on the ImageNet dataset. So wala siyang fine-tuning on the target dataset. And as expected, if it's not fine-tuned, the accuracy is lower than that of the fine-tuned model. But looking at our accuracy as compared to their implementation of VGGNet, okay, we are our fine-grained test accuracy is actually 80.60%, as compared to their best model, which is 71.70%. And if we increase the number of layers to 19, we have actually gotten 81.81%. There is an asterisk here saying that our models are actually we integrated batch normalization in our VGG networks. This we use that because nag-umpisa actually yung batch normalization in residual networks. So si VGG networks wala pang batch normalization. So that might affect the result of this. That might explain why is there a difference between the result of the two experiments. Next one is, let's compare our results, our ResNet results compared to their VGG networks. ResNet, as you have seen here, have less parameter count, right? We have only 21 million up until 58 million. That is still significantly lower than 135 million parameters. But as you can notice, our experiments, our implementations of ResNet were able to reach as high as 85% for the fine-grained classification accuracy as compared to their best model, which is 71.7. And by the way, they did not experimented heavily on the coarse-grained test accuracy. But I think it would be best to first focus on the coarse-grained test accuracy before we delve into more specific labels that we can find in fine-grained test accuracy. Okay lang na siguro we start our work with looking into classifying if they are all bell peppers as compared to delving into if this is a yellow bell pepper, a red bell pepper, and what, right?
Aaron, 5 minutes more.
Okay, thank you. Next, let's go to AlexNet. Looking at them, we are comparing AlexNet with our ResNet implementation. We have the same parameter count, but we were able to reach 85.67% as compared to 70.70. This, I think, is because of course, the number of layers in the network and the different technologies or innovations that were introduced in ResNet. And lastly, let's look at the DenseNet result. So it's the same network. It has the same number of parameters. The only difference is ours is using softmax while theirs is using SPM. The difference between them is a little bit small. That is 85. They have 85%, while on the other hand we have 85.75%. Okay, and last one, we compare our best models. Comparing our best models, we can actually see that we increase the dense net layers up until 201. Uh, we have a little bit more number of parameters, but we were able to achieve as high as 1% increase in accuracy for the fine grain test accuracy. For the coarse grain test accuracy, we reached the highest one, which is 91.99. And looking at this one, notice that there is a big difference between the fine grain accuracy and the coarse grain accuracy. But I think moving forward, it would be best to first focus on coarse grain tests or on the coarse grain labels before we delve into more specific labels. And these are just visual representations of what we have, why we have decided to use softmax, okay, instead of SPM. Apart from this is actually the default. Softmax is the default for classification models, for CNN classification models. As compared to SVM, softmax is very easy to understand or very easy to interpret. The result is very easy to interpret. So looking at this, we have visually similar looking fruits. They have the same shape, but our classification models were able to actually recognize them with this high of a probability or likelihood. This is the different vegetables that we have. So let me some examples of this. And lastly, these are some of the images of products, of refrigerated products that we can see. Visually similar, but ito kasi yung mga fine-grained labels na. So it's both yogurt, but we can differentiate between the two. So here are our contributions. First, we present a comprehensive set of experiments on the use of CNNs for grocery product classification. We also provide our code and train models for reproducibility and utilization. So you can run our experiments and see if or validate our experiments. And lastly, we show that our implementation surpasses that of a classification accuracy of current models that we have in the baseline paper. And that's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. We're now opening questions. We're now entertaining questions from the audience. Oh, okay. I just saw a question for Dr. Jamie. Sorry, but anyway, for Aaron's presentation, with his talk, with his paper presentation entitled "Using Convolutional Neural Nets for Hierarchical Grocery Store Product Classification." Okay. So quickly, Aaron, you actually made use of softmax, no, instead of SVM.
Yes.
But academically, we know that softmax is easier to implement and even easier to understand. And the results had shown that softmax over SVM had a higher probability rate, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so if there are no questions, thank you, Aaron, for your paper presentation, and we would like to present this certificate of recognition. By the way, Aaron's paper is a candidate for best paper. So tomorrow afternoon, we would be announcing the best paper for this year's PCSC 2021. So let's cross our fingers for Aaron. So with that, allow me to share my screen for Aaron's certificate. So Aaron, congratulations, certificate of recognition is awarded to you for presenting your paper entitled "Using Convolutional Neural Networks for Hierarchical Grocery Store Product Classification," given today. Yes, today, May 6th of 2021, and this 21st Philippine Computing Science Congress, signed Dr. Randy Gamboa, Congress Chair, and our dear CSP President, Dr. Rachel Edita Rojas. Congratulations, Aaron, and please stay tuned, stay until tomorrow, until the awarding. Okay, we're expecting you to stay on. Thank you very much, and congratulations again. Let's give a big round for Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So let's move on with the next presenter. Our next presenter is um, ni- the is with a paper entitled "A Collaborative Augmented Reality-Based GIS Graphical Information Systems for Visualizing Community Issues." The authors are Neil Justin Romblon and Arnulfo As. Oh, so Dr. Arnie Ascaraga. The presenter this afternoon for this paper is Mr. Neil Justin Romblon. Neil, are you around and ready already? Okay, right. Neil is ready. So Neil, you now have the Zoom conference. You may now proceed. You may now start. We don't have any audio, Neil. Can you check your mic?
Okay, so sorry about that.
Okay, it's okay.
Okay, so once again, hello everyone. I'm Neil Justin Romblon, also from the LaSalle University. I'm also a faculty, and this is actually my master's thesis, which I just finished this February. Okay, so what I'll be presenting is a collaborative AR-based geographic information system for visualizing community issues. So the outline for my presentation is going to be: first, I will present you I will discuss the motivation for the study. Then I will briefly discuss what is GIS and AR, or augmented reality. Then I will present the system itself, and lastly, I will present how I evaluated the system. Okay, so first, the motivation. So in the community, there is a set of issues which we can categorize and refer to as non-emergency issues. So these are the issues that are not urgent but still provides a detriment to one's quality of life. So for example, in this picture, the picture on the left, you can see that yung electrical lines, they are all entangled to the tree. So we can argue that this is not necessarily an urgent issue since it is still working. However, possible issues might arise in the future, which could heavily impact the delivery of the electricity in the community. And on the picture on the right, you can see that the pedestrian lane is slightly faded, which possibly in the future uh, could also be the cause of some accidents. So even though most of these are minor problems, when it accumulates, it reflects negatively on a community. So the problem with non-emergency community issues is that it is possible to be left unattended. So an undergraduate study in the LaSalle University attempts to address this problem by implementing a crowdsourcing platform. So their system is called Fix City, and what it does is people of that community can post a report, as seen in the picture on the right. They can react or comment on other people's reports, and also the management can also update the status of those reports of those reported issues to notify the community. Okay, so here are some examples of the reports. So in this picture on the left, the report was there's no sidewalk, and on the right is that there's some leak in the sidewalk. However, there is a consequence in crowdsourcing, and that it potentially brings about an influx of data, which may then be overwhelming for the management's current process. Additionally, the users are more aware of the community's issues as it is publicly listed on the platform. Thus, it is important that the management can effectively address this data in a timely manner. So this brings us to the problem statement. Monitoring numerous community-related issues requires intuitive tools and effective visualization for improving the management's decision-making process. So what can be done about it? Actually, there is an instance of this problem being solved in the past, and that is through the Dowding system. So the Dowding system, it not specifically solves community issues, but more on the influx of the data aspect. So the Dowding system, this is a surveillance system used in World War II by the United Kingdom. to monitor both friendly and enemy air traffic. So in the doubting system, uh, they have observer posts and radar stations that are strategically laid out on their western coasts to detect enemy air traffic, or uh, rather unknown air traffic. And whenever these reports come up, these information would then be sent through telephone lines, which would basically then end up in their command headquarters. And these informations, as they come in, they are processed and transferred in the filter room. And in the filter room, uh, basically what happens in the filter room is that manually, so staff members inside of it, manually they corroborate these reports, they organize them, they check for discrepancies, and they judge whether the report is accurate or not. Since in this time, in this era, uh, a lot of it were manually reported, so hindi pa siya entirely automatic. And then these organized reports are then given to the plotters, which then presents this information on a plotting table. So the plotting table, as pictured on the right, this provides the commanders of the war. This provides them a coherent view of the state of the battlefield. So they place specific objects on top of the plotting table to represent the inferred location of the detected air traffic. Now, a lot of these processes involved were done by humans. So yung initial reports, yung filtering, and even the actual plotting, all of these were done manually. And all of these are assigned to specialized jobs. So meaning they are specially trained for that process. Nowadays, if this kind of system were to be implemented digitally, it would be referred to as a geographic information system, or GIS for short. So what are geographic information systems? So geographic information systems, these are conceptual. This is a conceptual framework for collection, organization, and analysis of spatial data. So GISs, they present spatially referenced data in a coherent manner, allowing for better analysis. This is because spatially referenced data are placed on a map as it appears by their coordinates. So this provides a better context as opposed to just presenting the data in a tabular manner. However, the downside to this is that to use a GIS effectively, it requires some degree of computer literacy. And one of the reasons is that the zooming and panning operations, so yung navigation of the GIS, this is argued to be cognitively complex and tedious tasks. So that might be a barrier in for the management to adapt a GIS. So this is where I propose the integration of augmented reality to a geographic information system. So first, I will discuss what augmented reality is. So augmented reality, as defined by Azuma in 1997, he defines AR as having these three principles. First is it combines real objects with virtual content. Next is it can be interacted with in real time, meaning everything is happening in a live feed. The footage or the video is not pre-recorded. And the third principle is that it is registered in 3 dimensions. So this means that if the user moves around a target virtual object, it would appear as if it is actually placed on that real space. So the virtual object, it's not just overlaid on top of the footage. It is also kept track of such that it appears as if it is anchored on the physical space. So to better understand augmented reality, we can also compare it to its more popular relative, which is virtual reality. So in virtual reality, the user can only interact with objects from the simulated environment inside the computer interface. So typically, virtual reality systems have some sort of monitor, which basically isolates the user from the real environment. However, augmented reality on the other hand, we can think of it as some sort of a window, which just integrates virtual objects into the real environment. So the user is not entirely isolated from the real environment. So going back to what I proposed, there have been studies in the past that integrates AR and GIS. And there has been an effort to classify these studies functionally. So the first classification is it is classified as an augmented territory. So augmented territory applications or systems, this is where GIS data are augmented into their real world counterpart to provide additional information. So in this example, sa picture on the right, this is Google Maps live view, which shows you direction in AR. So as you move around, you can see where you should turn, left, or it also shows you the labels for where you are. And the other classification is augmented map. And in augmented map, the GIS itself is presented in augmented reality. So not only the data, but rather the entire system is presented in augmented reality. So the main difference between the two is we can think of augmented territory as everywhere AR, meaning it is more focused on outdoor applications. So AR objects are integrated into the environment, while on the other hand, augmented map, we can think of it as directed AR, wherein the augmented objects, the virtual objects are focused on a single area or a single surface, as also seen in the example earlier. Another is that augmented territory mainly uses GIS data to improve on the real environment. So in augmented territory, virtual objects are more of an augmentation, which could help the user to further understand what their environment is about. And on the other hand, augmented map is more focused on providing a different interface on a digital system. So the study or the system that I'm going to present today is more focused on the augmented map aspect. So the idea behind augmented map is that augmented reality keeps the navigation of the city, of the virtual city, closer to the traditional physical movements, as the user can simply just move around the plotting table to view it in other perspectives. So my study's objective is to uh, to present a system that is a collaborative augmented reality visualization, taking the augmented map approach for management and supporting decision making on community related issues. So collaborative, since there would most likely be a council or something like that whenever an action has to be made on these community issues. Since it would not be optimal to have them all look into a single screen, so that is where the collaborative aspect comes from. So this is the ideal use case for the system. So as you can see, there are multiple users. All of them are on a single session, and all of them can see the same virtual space. So whenever someone makes some manipulations or makes some updates to this to the contents into the system, the other users would also see the updates. So they can hold the devices in handheld, or they can also mount it around the table. So next is I'll present the features of the system. So the system allows for augmented reality visualization and navigation. So the system visualizes and localizes community issues as they appear to the city model. So as you can see here, this red dot is actually the community issue in the city. Then itong small blocks na to, these are the buildings in the city. So this entire thing is the city itself. And the blue rectangle is what I call in the paper as what I refer to the paper as in the paper as the play area, which I will discuss later. So it offers augmented reality visualization and navigation. So here is a more close-up view of the issues. So when the user taps on the issue, it would show a dialog screen which presents the details of the issue. So when is it reported, what its current status is, and description. Additionally, the the user can also update the status by just pressing on, but just by pressing on these options. Okay. So other than that, it also offers city model navigation. So aside from just moving around the city physically, they could also uh, they also have the option to navigate through it using panning, rotating, and zooming up operations. So for the more advanced user, they can also do that, which would update the city model as it appears on the table. So pag nag-zoom sila, the building or the city model would also zoom in. And this update would also reflect to the other devices connected on the same session. Okay. Other parts of the system is that it allows for the user to place in pins. So yung picture sa taas, this is the example of an info pin. And the motivation behind this is that uh, it's some sort of a bookmark feature uh, which could help the user to integrate some information into the city. Then ping is it's the motivation for a ping is just to tell the other users where to look. Okay. So next is the system architecture. And before I discuss the architecture itself, I would like to discuss the frameworks and engines that I've used to develop the system. So the system is developed in Unity along with Google AR Core SDK for the AR component and CTGML for the data format of the city models. So in AR Core, so this is the SDK for augmented reality component. So in AR Core, they have this concept called anchors. And AR Core anchors attaches virtual objects to trackables. So an example of a trackable is a plane, a detected plane, or a feature point in the environment. Cloud anchors, on the other hand, are the shareable equivalent of anchors. So cloud anchors can be hosted by the server and it can be resolved by the client. So pag resolve, they're basically downloading or getting the data from the cloud regarding they're getting the information on how to recreate that anchor in their own device. Okay. Next is CTGML. So CTGML is a standardized open data model and an XML-based exchange format for representing 3D city models. So the difference of CTGML with the more traditional 3D model formats such as FBX or OBJ is that CTGML is able to capture city-related information such as buildings, roads, bodies of water, and vegetation. And it is also able to annotate certain aspects of the city and the buildings itself. So as you can see here, it can also define whether the model is a wall surface or whether it is a roof surface or and so on. So here's the architecture of the system. There are four main modules. The first is the play area module. So the play area module, this is the turquoise bounding box, which contains the city. So the play area module, it anchors the city to the real environment. So it can also be used to indicate which part of the surface should be cleared out. The next is the city module. So the city module is the city itself, the city model itself. It is also responsible for mesh generation since, as you might have seen earlier, CTGML is more similar to an XML format, and it's not really readily importable to some engines such as the Unity engine. So there's a step for mesh generation when generating the city model. So the city module is also responsible for that. The next is the network module. So the network module is responsible for the collaborative aspect of the system. So the network module, what it does is whenever updates to the play area and the city module were made, it would update all the other connected users, all the other connected devices. And the network module is also responsible for hosting and resolving the anchors. And lastly is the community issues module. And this is where the Fixity application that I mentioned earlier comes in. So this is where it integrates. The Fixity app has a database which contains all the reported issues. So all of those reported issues are downloaded and is processed by the community issues module to register it or to place it as it appears in its location in the city model. As you can see, the city issues module has minimal dependence with the rest of the other modules. So the reasoning for this is so that the system can be adapted to other problem domains. So next is the evaluation of the application's performance. So the system is evaluated in terms of its frame rate, of its average frame rate. The models used were taken from the Berlin 3D portal. So the Berlin 3D portal offers it is a free-to-use 3D city model repository, and it offers city models in CityGML format. And more specifically, this is the area of Berlin, which I used for my evaluation. And it resulted into these files. So these files, I've categorized them based on their vertex and on their size, polygon count, and vertex count. So the polygon count and vertex count is not readily available from the files itself, so I had to write a script for it to determine the count of the vertices. So the count of the vertices can be seen here. So each of these items is a single vertex. Then I used those files to form evaluation sets, roughly based on their vertex count. So I grouped them up, and I managed to organize 5 evaluation sets. Each roughly have 50,000 difference in their vertex counts. So the first set has around 50,000 vertices, second set around 100,000, third set 146, and so on. And to provide some additional context, this is what it looks like for each evaluation set. So this is set number 1. If you have been to Berlin before, I have not, but this building is I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but it's Mehringplatz. So this is that building. And this is evaluation set number 2. So this is evaluation set number 3. So this, as you can see, this is where evaluation set number 1 is. And roughly around here is evaluation set number 2. This is evaluation set number 4. So it's much larger. And this is evaluation set number 5. For the testing, I used the smartphone, which is Xiaomi Mi 9, which is relatively recent. It was released in early 2019. So the performance data that is collected is the average frame rate, which is taken from separate sections of the system. So the program can be divided into 2 screens, which is first the main menu screen where the city is loaded and generated. And next is the AR scene where the AR visualization is happening. We can also further divide it into 3 sections. So the first section is the initialization section. So this is where mesh generation is happening. Next is the loaded city. So this is where the city's meshes has been generated. So it's more of an idle state, but the city's model is already being rendered. So both of these are in the main menu screen. Then the next is the city place section, which is in the AR screen. So in the city place section, this is where the city model is placed in the AR screen. After gathering the average frame rate for these 3 sections, we got the following results. So The baseline, this is where there are no city models present yet. There are no models present yet in the screen. So for the main
Neil,
menu,
5
it's
minutes more.
okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. So for the main menu, it's the baseline is around 60 FPS. So we can think of this as how the application would perform without any rendering. So 60 FPS the main menu and 30 FPS on the AR screen. And on the first set, it performs relatively good since there's a minimal drop in the frame rate. However, when it comes to the second baseline, which is just an additional 50,000 vertices, it dropped to half. So as you can see, it dropped to around 15 FPS and it drops rapidly eventually converges to around 10 FPS. Generally, the threshold for an acceptable frame rate is around 15 FPS. Anything less may impair the user's ability to perform tasks in the application. So this is not acceptable since sa second set pa lang we are already on the border of the usability of the application. So that only covers a small amount of the city. So since we are trying to target an ARGIS for a large city or a large community, the frame rate performance of the application matters. As such, there is an effort that has been made to optimize the algorithm, specifically in the mesh generation process. So the mesh generation, to provide some context, I didn't write it from scratch. There's actually a tool for it, an open source tool for it, which basically generates a mesh object for each defined polygon in the GML file. And each mesh object is equal to a single draw call in the Unity engine. And a draw call, this is an instruction sent to the graphics API, which includes information regarding the object to be rendered. Generally, the amount of draw calls indicate how resource intensive the models are. So here is what it looks like, the mesh objects in Unity. So take note of this, that there are a lot of objects. And this single object only corresponds to the single surface in the 3D model. So these are the number of draw calls for each data set, for each evaluation set. So for the first set, there's around 2,000 draw calls. And the fifth set, there are around 14,000. So as you can see in the table, the number of draw calls scales linearly with the vertex count. However, we know that linear is not good enough since on the second evaluation set pa lang, we are already performing bad. The good thing is in CityGML, it also defines the type of polygon. So it could define the surface as either roof surface, wall surface. There's also the ceiling surface and so on. So the idea for this optimization approach is to merge the polygons of the same type into a single mesh object. So that is what I did, and it resulted to this. So earlier, we had multiple mesh objects, and now each building is reduced to a minimum of 3 mesh objects, since all buildings at least have a floor surface, a wall surface, and a roof surface. So the optimized draw calls is as follows. So for all evaluation sets, there is a relative draw call reduction of around 90%. So of course, less mesh objects also means less draw calls. So how does this translate to the application's performance? So this is the optimized performance of the application. First, you might notice na for the initialization steps, we had a decrease in the average frame rate. This is because of the additional overhead produced by the optimization technique of the optimization approach. However, it balances out eventually for the larger data sets. And we can also see that in the AR screen, the largest evaluation set now performs at around 16.5 FPS when it was performing around 10 FPS before. Now, if we use the earlier statement na generally the threshold for an acceptable frame rate is 15 FPS, then if we use this statement as a measure if if the application is sufficiently usable, then we can say that it is. So in conclusion, an AR-based GIS mobile application is presented, and it had four main components. And the fourth component is, which in this case is the community issues module, is has minimal dependency with the other modules, which means that it is possible to adapt this system with other problem domains. And we have seen that after optimizing the application, we were able to get a performance of about 15 FPS. So for future work, further optimization can be made. One thing that I can think of is that we can automatically reduce the fidelity of the models when zoomed out, since we can't really see that much detail when it is far away from us. Another future work is that additional GIS capabilities can be implemented, such as layers or views of the data. But the thing is, it requires more data from the problem domain, which is unfortunately currently not present in FixCT. And another feature work is that we can also evaluate the system on other aspects, such as usability and some sort of a collaborativeness measure. And lastly, another thing is that the system can be implemented with remote collaboration. So what I mean by that is basically users can interact through the system even though they are not in the same room. So since we are able to connect the users, currently we are just able to connect the users when they are in the same room or in the same wireless network. However, I believe it is possible to connect them through the internet. So in that case, if that was implemented, then we might be able to allow remote collaboration in a sense that they are not in the same room. So that is all for my presentation, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Neil, Justin, Romblon. Do we have? We are now open for questions from the audience. Okay, so hearing none, allow me to present this certificate of recognition to the authors of this paper. Oh, just I'll be stopping your screen. Okay, thank you, Justin. So here, okay. So I'd like to extend this certificate of recognition to the authors of this paper. Neil, Justin, oh, your family name is omitted. My apologies for that. Our apologies for that. I would have to ask Dr. Randy to correct this one. He was the one personally doing the creation of the certificate. So Dr. Randy, please do another one for Justin Romblon. Anyway, we will be correcting this one, Neil Justin. So congratulations, Neil Justin, for your paper presentation together with Dr. Arnie Ascaraga, with your paper entitled "A Collaborative Augmented Reality-Based GIS for Visualizing." This is given today on the 21st Philippine Computing Science Congress, signed Dr. Randy Gamoa and Dr. Rachel Edita Rojas. Thank you, and congratulations again. Let's give a big round of applause for Justin and Dr. Arnie.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on, we will now proceed with the third presenter today. By the way, before proceeding with third presenter, Neil Justin's paper is also a candidate for best paper. Okay, so Neil Justin, please stay tight until tomorrow afternoon. So you might be one of the favored presenters and then you can be our next PCSC Best Paper awardee. Okay, so sit tight and until tomorrow afternoon. So moving on, we will have now our third presenter. The title of the paper to be presented is "A Case-Based Approach in the Generation of Murder Stories." So probably these authors are actually fans of that mini TV series, Murder She Wrote, no, probably. Anyway, the authors are Angelo Gabriel Ablasa, Miguel Lazaro Barde, Woon Suk Chu, Jose Vicente Saison, and Ethel Ong, Dr. Ethel Ong from De La Salle. So with that, the presenter today is Mr. Miguel Lazaro Barde. Miguel, are you ready now?
Yes, sir. Good
Okay,
afternoon.
you can already start sharing your screen, and you're now the Zoom conference owner. Okay,
Okay.
fire it on.
Thank you. I will share my screen now.
Yes, please.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, you're good to
Okay.
go.
Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Miguel Boarde from De La Salle University, Manila as well, here to present our undergraduate thesis, a case-based approach to automated murder story generation. So the proponents of this research include myself, Miguel Boarde, Angelo Ablaza, Juan Sukcho, and Jose Saison, and our advisor, Dr. Ethel Ong. Okay, so let's start. So, over the recent decades, computers empowered by artificial intelligence and natural language processing have been able to and have been used for automatically generating stories. So, most of these automated story generators apply rules to select story characters and sequence story events in order to produce a coherent narrative in a target genre. A few examples would be for mystery stories, folk tales, fantasy stories, and fables. So one such genre that we focus on is crime stories. So these are seen in pop culture media with plot angles that emphasize the investigators and the victims. One example is the adventure of Sherlock Holmes, where we follow Sherlock solving puzzles and understanding human behavior to find the culprit of the crime. So, in order to bridge story generation and crime stories, the approach we looked into is case-based reasoning. So we found that CBR is essentially a four-step process as adapted from the works of Amat and Plaza. So these are the steps. So we have the retrieve step wherein we retrieve a similar case from the case library, the reuse step where we reuse the events from the retrieved case, the revise step, revise the contents of the events to fit the new case, the retain step to retain the new case by saving it to the case library. So in our approach, each case corresponds to a murder story and its corresponding events. So lastly, in order to make all of this possible, we created and utilized a variety of knowledge bases, which served as the backbone of our system. So here are the most of the different knowledge bases used by our system. Firstly, we have the case library. The case library is populated with multiple cases, carefully selected to ensure variance. It contains previously solved murder cases sourced from police procedural pop culture literature, such as Bones or Law and Order, that the system can reference. Originally, we looked into murder cases using court proceedings. However, we found that their stories lacked depth and did not give much information on the background of the case. So we transitioned to pop culture to populate the case library because we found important elements of stories such as the details of the relationship of the characters, how they got to the location, the descriptions of the weapons, and the sequence of events that led to the conflict. So pieces of evidence from each case is stored in the case library because of its importance to the investigation. So here's an example of how a piece of evidence is stored inside the case library. So as we can see here, the attributes are the case ID, which is the case which the piece of evidence is corresponds to, the name, the description of the evidence, and the evidence location where it was found. Next, we have the event model knowledge base. So each case is associated with a chain of events, which is adapted by the event generator in formulating a murder story. An event describes an action that is carried out by a story character, whether a suspect or a victim, possibly with the use of an object, such as a weapon. Each event corresponds to their own event model, and pre and post conditions are taken into account. So here's an example of how the event model for, say, the event kill is represented. The precondition states that the suspect must have a weapon equipped or must have a motive. Correspondingly, the resulting effect it has is the victim dies. Another knowledge base that the system utilizes is domain knowledge or the common sense knowledge. This is represented as a semantic ontology of common sense knowledge on concepts and their semantic relations that are relevant to a murder story. So here is what our domain knowledge would look like. So for example, the semantic relation found in can be applied to the concepts knife and kitchen, since a knife can be found in a kitchen. Likewise, the semantic relation inflicted by can be applied to the concept bullet wound and gun, since a bullet wound can be inflicted by a gun. This knowledge base is used all throughout the process of story generation. So using the CBR process mentioned earlier, our system, AI Homes, adapts Amat and Plaza's four-step process into the following. So first, the system searches for a similar case based on the user's input. Next, the system retrieves the similar case from the knowledge base. Afterwards, the system reuses the retrieved case information, and finally adapts the retrieved case's information to fit the new case or the input. Beginning from search, which ultimately leads to retrieve, this process is called case matching. In this phase, content determination is done first, wherein the system analyzes the inputs and also infers values if the inputs are missing. Inferring is done by using the semantic relations in the domain knowledge library. The system can infer values such as murder weapon and cause of death, depending on the other supplied inputs. So for example, if the weapon is left blank, but the cause of death is a stab wounds, the system will infer a weapon, such as a knife, and that will be used throughout the story generation process. So afterwards, the elements of the given case, inferred or otherwise, and the cases in the case library are compared, and the similarity between the new case and each case in the case library is calculated through weighted average. So the similarity between the elements is calculated based on the presence of semantic relations between the two values, again, using the domain knowledge base. So this is the equation that we use to calculate the similarity score. So as you can see, it takes into consideration the importance factor of the element being compared and the similarity between the same element found in the two cases. I will further expand on this on the next slide. So here's an abstracted representation of how the similarity score by weighted average is obtained. So the thinner arrows represent less important elements, such as location, while the thicker arrows represent more important elements like motive and weapon. The similarity score between the elements represent the presence of semantic relations between the two. So the score gets a 1 if they're exactly the same, as seen here in the location. And it gets a 0.5 if they are not exactly the same, but there exists a semantic relation that can be found between them in the domain knowledge. So as you can see here, knife and corkscrew get a score of 0.5 because a semantic relation exists between them. Otherwise, the similarity gets a 0. Importance factor and the similarity scores between the elements are then used in the equation to calculate the overall similarity score between the two cases. Finally, AI Homes retrieves the most familiar cases or case, or the case with the highest overall similarity score in the library. Next. Next, we have the reuse and adapt steps, which is the process we call event generation. The event generator is tasked to adapt the retrieved case and its events to fit the scope of the current or new case. The retrieved case is used as a template in order to adapt the new information by filling the slots for the old values, such as character names and location, from an old case with the new values from the story world model. So I will expound on that. So here is another abstracted figure as an example of how event generation is done by AI Helm. So as you can see here, from the retrieved case, Juan and Pedro are the original suspect and victim from the retrieved case in the case library. And the events from the retrieved case are then used in the revised step and replaced with the new values of the new case from the user input, which are Joselito and Joseph as the suspect and the victim, respectively. So here, from the retrieved cases events above, you can see that they go through the revised step, and the output would be the events in the bottom, which will be the new events of the new case. So furthermore, event generation ensures that all the necessary events of a case are generated and inserted in the correct sequence. It is able to do this by adhering to a story script, which dictates which events go before what. So here in the example figure, the light purple events represent the events that were found in the retrieved case, while the dark purple events represent the events generated by the system to complete the event chain or the story. So as you can see, 5 events were added by the system to the event chain to fill in the gaps in the story. For better visualization, here's one of the possible resulting trees of the story script. So as you can see, the story is divided into three segments, namely the introduction, the conflict, and kill, each having their own event types. The red colored nodes represent the main events, which are events present in all stories generated. The blue colored nodes represent story dependent events, which are only generated depending on the current story being created. For example, the retrieve weapon from scene event will not be generated if the brewing weapon event is present, meaning that the suspect brought the weapon to the location and doesn't need to retrieve it from the scene. Another approach to reuse and adapt stage we used is the hybrid event generator that we created. In contrast to the traditional approach wherein it matches with one case, the hybrid event generator matches three different cases based on location, motive, and weapon that the user provided. Afterwards, it combines the three matched cases to create multiple varying stories. And additionally, in the adapt step, confidence scoring also occurs. So in the process of confidence scoring, each story generated by the system is assigned a corresponding confidence score. The confidence score is computed by scoring the resulting events based on whether or not they were generated in the reuse stage, wherein they would get a higher score, or the adapt stage, wherein they get a lower score. I'll further expand on the confidence scoring in the next slide. So here is a breakdown of how we score each type of event. So as you can see, there are two types of scored events, namely the main events and the filler events. Here you can see the score is changed whether if it's reused or adapted. Whether or not it utilizes inferred values using domain knowledge also affects the score as well. All of these contribute to the computation of the confidence score of each story, which is shown in the equation below. So T stands for the total number of events, E is the story event, and score stands for the score multiplier of each type of event, and F stands for the filler event. Okay, so here's an example of a story that AI Homes generates during surface realization after it goes through all the modules. Okay. So now for the evaluation of the system. In evaluating the system, two literary writers assess the system's generated stories using both quantitative measures as well as qualitative feedback on the stories. In the evaluation phase, the literary writers were asked to rate 10 generated stories based on three criteria: content, coherence, and fluency, using a 5-point Likert scale. So the criteria is adapted from Ang et al. 2011. And here's what it means. So content refers to the presence of the story elements and the details in the story text. Coherence refers to the overall comprehensibility and believability of the story. It includes evaluating if the story events are well sequenced and gives an idea to explain the events that led to the actual murder. Fluency refers to the language used to form the sentences in the story text, whether they are grammatically correct or use concise and non-flowery words in order to be straightforward in the conveyance of the story. That means it's direct to the point and highlights the most important parts of the story. So here are the summarized results and takeaways from the three criteria. As a synthesis of the results showed that the stories generated by the traditional case-based reasoning algorithm, on average, scored better than the hybrid algorithm. But overall, both approaches scored good, as it was above 3.0. For content, evaluators found that essential story elements were present and commended that the character descriptions, acquiring of the weapon, weapon actions, background information, and character actions being present as well. However, they found that the conflict between the victim and the suspect that caused the murder was lacking. For the coherence criteria, they praised the logically sequenced events. They also praised the proper use of transition words and stated that the generated stories were plausible and make sense, but noted that one story had an illogical sequence with unreasonable character motivations. In the criteria of fluency, they commended the grammatically correct sentences in the story, proper word choices, verb tenses, and correct transition words. However, they noted the overabundance or overuse of transition words. So overall, both writers evaluated 10 stories, and here's a summary of their comments. First, they both agreed that there is enough variance in the generated story, with both evaluators giving it a score of 4.0 to the overall criteria. The second, one evaluator agreed that consistency and plot structure is evident in the generated stories, while the second evaluator commented that some stories had insufficient backstories for the characters. And lastly, one evaluator agreed that the stories can be easily understood, while the second thought that some events were too vague or abstract. For example, the conflict of the two characters wasn't explained thoroughly, and the suspect's motive did not match the actions of the suspect. Okay, so in summary, the process of case-based story generation begins with searching through a case library to find similar cases that can be adapted to solve the new problem. Likewise, our case-based reasoning approach for AI homes uses a case library of murder stories that a story planner can utilize to generate varying scenarios on how a crime has been carried out. Additionally, I also discussed the weighted similarity score formula that is used to compute the similarity score between the two cases, which are then used to match the new case with the old case. Similarly, the confidence score formula is also used to compute the confidence score of each of the corresponding generated stories. This shows how confident the system is with the generated stories, with inferring values and generating its own events being a factor to the overall confidence score. Moving forward, we recommend future work to look into the populating of the case library with more stories. In addition, we also recommend the exploration of the pre-processing of the witness testimonies in order to extract more information regarding the current case. Additionally, machine learning could also be incorporated into future iterations of AI homes by using natural language processing to extract crime scene knowledge and populate the case base with the extract details and create better character models. Machine learning approaches such as recurrent neural networks or LSTMs can also be used for neural text generation to generate the resulting story text through entity representation. And lastly, the hybrid event generator can also be enhanced to infer relationships between story characters that they may allow the possibility of having multiple suspects. We also recommend looking into further improvements regarding the logical sequence of the story. So here are the references. So once again, that was the presentation for our paper, a case-based approach to automated murder story generation. Thank you for listening and are now open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Just perfectly timed. Do we have questions from the audience? Do you have questions? If not, okay. So that would mean allow me to share this the certificate of recognition given to you and to your team, Miguel. For a moment. Okay, fish. So congratulations, Angelo, Gabriel Ablasa, Miguel Lazaro Baarde, Won Suk Chu, Jose Vicente Saison, and Dr. Ethel Ong for this paper entitled "A Case-Based Approach in the Generation of Murder Studies Stories." This is given in this 21st Philippine Computing Science Congress held today, May 2021. Signed, Dr. Randy Gamboa and our dear President, Dr. Rachel Edita Rojas. Congratulations, Miguel. Let's give them a big round of applause.
Thank you, sir.
And do take note that this paper of yours is also a candidate for best paper for this year's PCSC. So sit tight and be still and be with us until tomorrow afternoon. Okay, so thank you very much. And now
Thank you, sir.
let's move on to the last presenter for this afternoon with a paper to be presented entitled Cursive Handwriting Word Recognition on the English Alphabet using CNN LSTM Hybrid Approach. The authors are Donata Kula, Rabin Bote, or both, okay, or Kyle Andre Gonzalez, Romuald Julian Marfa, and Kyle Emmanuel Done. And the presenter for this paper is Dr. Donata or Donna Akula. Okay, hopefully I'm correct with that. Donna, you now have the Zoom conference.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Assistant Professor Donata Diahula from University of Santo Tomas. So I will be sharing with you the undergraduate research paper of my advices entitled Cursive Handwriting Word Recognition on the English Alphabet using CNN LSTM Hybrid Approach. So the flow of my presentation will be first with the introduction, the background of research significance, objectives, methodology used, and the results and analysis. And lastly, we have the conclusions and recommendations. So as everyone knows, handwriting is fundamental aspect of human communication. So despite the proliferation of various improvements in communication, such as social media and instant messaging, the process of handwriting is a basic skill that is still prominently used in every actions. So we are aware that in comparison to print handwriting, cursive handwriting is more challenging to detect through computer vision due to its flowing and slanted nature. So unlike print handwriting, where a considerable space exists between each letter, most types of cursive handwriting possesses little to no space in between letters, which could confuse readers and machines alike. So in order to understand the complexity of handwriting detection, one must consider how a human naturally learns or how to write in his or preferred language. So inspired by the results of my former thesis advice regarding the paper enhanced intelligent character recognition approach using diagonal feature extraction and Euler number as classifier with modified one pixel with character segmentation. This paper explored the possibility of improving the performance in recognizing the word cursive handwriting. And since one of the recommendations of the previous paper to explore other methods or algorithms to improve the performance in recognition, we proposed the following method. So that is with the aim to increase the accuracy of the system in detecting word images. So we apply the convolutional neural network LSTM hybrid approach, which was used by Wang et al. For multi-label image classification. This was also used by Bao Guang et al. For image-based sequence recognition, and this application was scene text recognition to improve the overall accuracy, efficiency, and practicality. So Wang et al. In their paper argues that the reliability of CNN with regards to the classification of real-world images is necessary. So unlike testing data, which is performed in controlled environments. So real-world images contain multiple labels and characteristics which could alter the expected approach or output in order to address the label classification problem. So the researchers use recurrent neural network or LSTM as hybrid combination to CNN. As limitation of CNN in handling multi-label data is that it transforms it into single label classification problems while failing to further contextualize the dependencies with multiple labels. So in order to handle the dependencies with multiple labels, RNN is used to significantly or probably improve the accuracy of the system by analyzing the dependencies that CNN fails to perform. So the multi-label encoding and classification is handled by the RNN, while feature detection is handled by CNN. So for the significance of the study, so this study will benefit those who rely on usage of handwritten documents to execute tasks such as journalists, lawyers, educators, doctors, and others. And these documents from the past can be scanned and converted into plain text so that such reading material will be suitable as reading material in today's standards. So handwriting recognition can also be used in order to secure original files in a more convenient way as opposed to a simple scan document where text can be selected. So in addition to that, the study can also benefit the visually impaired since handwriting text that is recognized and processed can be converted into braille. And then For this one, the researchers will further advance the process in handwriting recognition in pursuit of scientific progress and service to the people. So with that, we have the following objective. So that is the general objective. This is to create a system that improves the capabilities in recognizing cursive handwriting by implementing the CNN. Specifically, we will be applying the decoding algorithm for the LSTM CNN in the handwriting recognition. And after that, we will be computing the required metrics to measure the performance of the said or the created system. So this model, so the methodology that we have used, this model is the implementation the researchers made in order to recognize cursive handwritten text with an acceptability accuracy. So the implementation only depends on NumPy, CG2, and TensorFlow inputs. So the system has three stages or phases: the pre-processing, training, and testing. So the pre-processing phase is not a separate entity, but is integrated in both training and testing. And this design was done like this for simplicity and removal of redundancies in the diagram. So a dashed line is placed to imply partial data stream to both training and testing. So the training phase loads the raw RGB image from the database. Okay. And after image loading, the next step is grayscaling, which turns RGB images to black and white. So after that, the system resizes the image to 128 by 32 pixels, and the module sends the pre-processed image in either to training or testing phase. So the training phase contains of 5 convolutional neural networks layers and 2 recurrent neural network or RNN or LSTM layers. So the model was trained using the data from the IAM database. So the final output of the training phase is CNN LSTM model, as you can see here, which will be the basis of the connections or CTC or connectionist temporal classification decoding layer with best path for predicting the word on the word file image. So the loss function will output a probability. So after decoding the outputs or the CTC outputs, an initial prediction will then be assisted by the lexicon that is trained with 50,000 words from Wikipedia. So we try to have 1 million. However, we have a problem with the parse tree. So it goes down too deep. So basically, we just included 50,000 words. And then 1,150 and 320 words was used for training, and then 186 words was used for testing. So for the result of our experiment, on the different decoding algorithms to determine which algorithms will work with the CNN LSTM implementation, based on the table, the best path with lexicon gives the best accuracy among the 4 decoding algorithms with 57.9439%. And then with that, we use the best path with lexicon as decoding algorithm for the CNN LSTM. And after the CNN LSTM system or testing the CNN LSTM system, the results were higher compared to the method used by the previous researchers, which actually I'm the advice also of the group. So from the test data, we pick 107, which is the data used by the previous researchers, and we use exactly the same inputs to feed in the CNN LSTM system with best path with lexicon as decoding algorithm. So in our result, we correctly recognize 62, which is actually 57.94.49 as compared to the previous result with 54.2056%. So with that, we concluded that the research or this research explained how the CNN LSTM model was utilized in recognizing cursive handwritten word images, and the model was trained using data from the AIM database. And the CNN LSTM implementation was able to recognize cursive handwriting words more than half at a time, which is 57.9439%. But of course, with the coding algorithm, best path with lexicon. In addition to that, in terms of metrics or accuracy, from the data that I have presented a while ago, the CNN LSTM with the coding algorithm obtained higher result as compared to the previous study. However, the increase in accuracy does not contribute significant improvement if we're going to compare it with the previous result. So we use some statistical methods to determine the significant improvement. However, even though in the current paper we use the lexicon, it still does not give an improvement or significant improvement. So based on that result, because as you can see, it's just 57%, more than 57%. We actually recommended to have a larger dictionary integration. So this can contribute greatly toward recognition. So words recognized with no sense will be automatically corrected to increase the chance of recognizing the word correctly. And the researchers use lexicon to serve as dictionary for the system to output words with meaning. So future researchers are encouraged to use larger corpus for lexicon or a new approach in dictionary integration. So one factor to consider is the language of the library to be integrated, which is depends on how the future researchers like to optimize the system. So in addition to that, we also recommend a large pure cursive training set. So because due to time constraint, we cannot cater the big or large cursive training. So we recommended to explore more and have that in case the future researchers have more time since it's already established, the initial establishments, you can just add pure cursive training set. And finally, for the recommendation of this research based on our experiment, the future researchers, since we have low accuracy result, can explore new algorithms. So specifically, I would like to stress in the segmentation part because that's actually the section whereas our paper have or our research or our results experiments have a problem. Okay, so that's all for my presentation. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm open to accept question if you have them.
Thank you, Donna. Right now, we're actually opening the floor for questions with the presentation of Donna and the group. By the way, there were a couple of questions fired in the Q&A in Zoom, but at least they were all answered. No? So, but just in case if you have questions, you can fire it on, and I will help you out. Remind the presenters or the authors answer those questions if ever you'll be doing it later. But for now, since there are no questions. Let's now proceed to the
Sir Greg,
yes, Donna.
if some of the audience here are interested in case, because I know the result of our study is not that good. So experimenting the CNN LSTM, I can leave my email address so that if they want to, collaborate or uh, ask for the uh, test cases or the inputs that we have used, so we can actually share.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that could be no. Considering that if you talk about LSTM, it's actually used to alleviate those issues in the with the so-called vanishing gradient problem.
Mhm.
So you might also would like to check that one out, how it actually is, how it actually addresses that particular issue. Frankly speaking, I'm still a bit immature in that particular area, but that is an area that I'm also quite intrigued. There's so much intrigue in that aspect. But nevertheless, yeah. So please, I think the email addresses. You can contact the PCSC committee if ever you'd like to connect with, or if not, the authors, sila Donna, can actually leave their email addresses in the chat box if ever there will be a need to collaborate or whatsoever. Okay, that would be, Donna has just declared that their team is open for that. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay. So in that case, we would now proceed with the certificates. So, okay, allow me to share my screen. Okay, this one, do you want to continue? Yes. Okay. There. Okay. So we'd like to congratulate Donna, Rabin, Kyle, Rumwald or Julian, and another Kyle. That must be a challenge, no? If there are two Kyles here. For a job well done in presenting their paper with entitled Cursive Handwriting World Recognition Handwriting World Recognition on the English alphabet using CNN LSTM hybrid approach. Okay, congratulations. So this is given today during the 21st Philippine Computing Science Congress, held virtually, and signed Dr. Randy Gamboa, Congress Chair, and Dr. Rachel Edita Rojas, our CSP President. So let's give a big round of applause to Donna's team. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you, sir.
And again, Donna, please be aware that your paper is also considered as for the best paper awardee, and then this would be given tomorrow afternoon at the tail end of our conference. So please be with us until tomorrow afternoon. Okay, or
All right.
else if
All
you
right,
won't be
sir. Thank
around,
you.
we might actually give it away to somebody else if in case you'll be the winner. Okay. Sige, salamat. And with that, I think we have gone through already all the paper presenters today. So that would mean we now come to a conclusion for day one. So before I would actually close day one, do we have any words coming from our conference chair, Congress chair, Dr. Randy Gamboa? Anything that you would like to leave some thoughts for our participants and paper presenters?
Just remind them, ano, Doc Greg, of
Okay.
the activity tomorrow. And
Okay.
then, okay, thank you.
Okay. So by the way, thank you for reminding me, Doc Randy. For tomorrow, for a moment. Okay. So for tomorrow, we would start at 9 o'clock, and we would have the continuation of the different paper presentations in the morning. And then in the afternoon, we will have the poster presentation. Okay, so tomorrow morning, we'll start at 9 o'clock. We would have Dr. Cherry, who would serve as our officer of the day, master of ceremonies. And then in the afternoon, we have Dr. Dave Marshall for the who would manage the afternoon session, and this will be all the poster presentations delivered via that so-called flash talk, and the closing ceremony, which will have the awarding of best paper, and then closing remarks and announcements like then our new set of the new members of the board, the incoming new members of the board, the three new incoming members of the board. And by the way, I'd like also to recognize that our this PCSC 2021 is also hosted by the University of the Philippines Department of Computer Science, led by Dr. Henry Adorna, who would want to stay at the background when in fact he's always on the front ground, and then Dr. Jimmy Caro from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Let's give them a big round of applause. Dr. Henry, would you like to show yourself for quickly so that the participants would see who you are?
Doc Greg,
Okay. Uh,
Doc Mark is also from
Doc,
UP DCS.
okay. Okay. And also Doc Marek. Okay. Doc Marek is around. Okay. Okay, so these are the guys from UP Diliman, including Dr. Jimmy, who was our speaker early this afternoon. Okay. Okay, thank you, Doc Henry and Doc
Can we,
Mar.
yeah, Doc Greg,
Yeah.
can we have a class picture, a photo op together with all
Okay.
the panelists and
Okay.
the board?
Sige. Okay, that would be great. For a moment, let me just arrange. Can you be the ones to capture the picture? Because I'm having multiple screens and it would actually get all the pictures, Dr. Randy? Kaya nat, no? Okay, if not, I would just try to crop it, no? If kung di kaya.
Can we ask everyone to switch on their video
So
cam?
all
Correct.
panelists, all members of the board and also the paper presenters, my request you turn on your videos, your camera, from Neil, Miguel, Donna, Aaron, Dr. Jimmy, then si Miguel. Miguel, are you around? Uh, okay, that's
Yes,
great.
sir.
Sige. So,
Right,
we'll
class,
try. Ha?
class picture daw. Sinong advisor natin? Sinong teacher?
Ang pinakamatanda, si Randy.
Oo nga, nakamask pa siya, no? Nakamask pa.
Oh, may comorbidities eh.
Tensya na, nasa loob ako na ng school eh. So required sa amin ang face mask.
Okay.
50
Okay.
years, 5 decades.
Si Doc Henry, si Doc Jimmy 4 decades, si Randy 5 decades. including basic ed na. Okay, sige, I'll just try to kuha na lang yung swipe. Okay, 1 2 3 smile.
Thank you to the presenters. Congratulations.
Okay, thank you very much. So that
Thank you
simply
po.
concludes our day 1 for PCSC 2021. Congratulations ahead to all the presenters and to the participants. Thank you for taking your time with us. And please do join us tomorrow as we still have a lot of things to go through. And again, tomorrow, the program starts at 9 a.m. Be there, be with us before 9 a.m. So it's been a pleasure being with you. Maing hapon ka natong tanan, all for the best. No? Thank you. Adelante.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Good
Okay.
afternoon.
Okay.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
po.
Thank you.
Okay na tayo, Greg.
Sorry, nawala. Yung swipe ko nawala.